Hey, welcome to Today Matters, our short devotional in the Word of God. We are journeying through the book of Psalms, one psalm at a time, and we are in Psalm 16. I'm going to take you through verses 3 and 4, and I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. And it says this: "The godly people in the land are my true heroes." Listen to what he says. He says, "I take pleasure in them. Troubles multiply for those who chase after other gods. I will not take part in their sacrifices of blood or even speak the names of their gods." Now, during times like we are experiencing with all the lies and the deceptions and the cancel culture that's out there, I mean, you just look at someone like Joe Rogan, for example, a guy who simply has the largest podcast following on earth, somewhere around 3 or 4 million people listen to this guy's podcast, okay? Largest one on earth. Signed a $135 million deal with Spotify. Yeah, all he does is bring guests on and let them talk. They talk about their areas of expertise. There's a lot of discussion, research studies are presented, and there's a bunch of other stuff on there depending on the guest as well. So Joe Rogan got COVID and then he recovered by taking a certain grouping of medicines that are not being offered by most doctors today because the far left liberal overseers won't let doctors use effective treatments for people because these treatments are very cheap. They're very inexpensive. And big pharmaceutical companies cannot make money off of these cheap yet effective remedies. Now, Joe has a doctor on his podcast. He points out what he took to recover quickly from COVID, and the doctor gives scientific evidence that COVID can be treated more effectively with these inexpensive options that are being blacklisted. Well, guess what? Joe Rogan is being labeled as spreader of misinformation. They're trying to cancel him and his 4 million followers. See, when I see all the evil that's taking place in our culture today, and by the way, it's not unlike what was going on in King David's day when he wrote this. They were trying to cancel King David. He was being accused of saying things that he didn't say. He may be the first to have been accused of spreading misinformation. He's struggling with what's going on in his culture, much like we're struggling with what's going on in our culture right now. And in the midst of his pain and his struggle, he reflects on where he can get encouragement. He says this in verse 3: "The godly people in the land are my true heroes." He says, "I take pleasure in them." See, the godly are his heroes. Those who love God are the ones I take pleasure in. He says, "I love those who will take a stand for God." I take my encouragement from people who will not bow to culture, who will not give in to mandates and lockdowns and ungodly behavior. And as we learned in earlier Psalms, David had looked around and godly people were hard to find. But when he found them, he says, "Ha ha, I rejoice." Now listen, make no mistake, as David said in verse 4, he says, troubles multiply for those who chase after other gods. Now, he says, I'm not going to take part in their sacrifices of blood or even speak the names of their gods. Whenever we chase after other gods, and in David's culture, there was a god to be worshiped for everything: the sun, the moon, the stars, the crops, the trees, you name it. In our culture, while that certainly is still here, it's a god of money, attention, fame, pride, political party, or any anti-God movement out there, whether BLM or LGBTQ or anything else that sets itself up against the Word of God and the Lordship of Jesus Christ. Whenever someone chases after those things, they are truly multiplying troubles for themselves. Now, I'll close with this. We will not take part to the bowing down to these organizations that we see in culture everywhere, whether it be corporations, whether it be organizations, news channels. We will stay true to the Word of God, as David did, and we will continue to fight the good fight as David did. And as your pastor, I can tell you, the godly people in the land are my true heroes. I take pleasure in them, and that is you. The church, our church, Skyline Church, I love you, and I want to say you are my true heroes. I take pleasure in you.